Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to give it a few more minutes for people to join before we get started. Thank you.
Muy buenas tardes a todos. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. Vamos a esperar solo un momentico más para darle oportunidad a todos que quieran acompañarnos, que se unan a la reunión. Gracias.
Hello, if you've just joined us, we're still allowing a few moments for people to join the workshop. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Thank you.
Y si nos acaba de acompañar o se acaba de unir, vamos a dar solamente un momentito más para que todos los que vayan a presentarse el día de hoy puedan acompañarnos. Así que empezaremos en breve. Gracias.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this afternoon's workshop, where we'll be covering updates to the funding guidelines for agencies that administer California climate investments. My name is Alex Stockton, and I am an air pollution specialist with the California Air Resources Board, or CARB for short.
Muy buenas tardes y gracias a todos por acompañarnos al taller de esta tarde, donde cubriremos las actualizaciones de las pautas de financiamiento para las agencias que administran las inversiones climáticas de California. Mi nombre es Alex Stockton, soy un especialista de contaminación del aire de la Junta de Recursos de Aire de California, o CARB, por sus siglas en inglés.
Before we dive into the workshop presentation, I'll cover some logistics.
Y antes de entrar en la presentación del taller, cubriré algunos puntos de interés aquí de logística.
First, I'll note that this workshop is being recorded.
Primero, mencionaré que este taller está siendo grabado.
Interpretation services will be provided today in Spanish.
Servicios de interpretación se brindarán hoy en español.
There will be a button labeled Interpretation on the Zoom screen. When it appears, click on that interpretation button and select the language you'd like to hear the meeting in.
En un momento aparecerá en la parte inferior de su pantalla de Zoom un botón con la etiqueta que dice Interpretation o interpretación. Cuando aparezca, seleccione ese botón y seleccione su idioma, Spanish o español, para escuchar la reunión.
To hear the interpreted language only, click Mute Original Audio. Now, we'll hear a message from our interpreters about interpretation services.
Y para escuchar solamente el idioma interpretado, seleccione por favor la función que dice Mute Original Audio o silenciar audio original. Y ahora daremos las instrucciones en pleno para todos presentes el día de hoy. De nuevo, gracias por acompañarnos. Se ofrecen servicios de interpretación para la sesión. Para escuchar el programa enteramente en español, por favor, en un momento, seleccione el icono con un globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla que dice Interpretation o interpretación. Luego seleccione su idioma Spanish o español y de ahí podrá escuchar todo el programa en español. Please note, interpretation services are being offered for today's session. So to listen to any comments or questions that are given in Spanish, please select the globe icon at the bottom of your screen that says Interpretation and then select your language, English. You'll then be able to hear a live rendering of said comment or question into English. Thank you, Alex. Back to you.
So throughout the workshop today, we invite you to submit your written questions using the Zoom Q&A feature. We recommend taking a moment to ensure your participant name on Zoom is your preferred name. This will help us call on you during the Q&A. You're welcome to add your organization and pronouns to your name as well. Later on in the workshop, we'll also invite those interested in making verbal comment to use the raise hand feature. If you're joining on the phone, dial *9 to raise and lower your hand. My colleague, Valerie Carranza, will help facilitate today's Q&A sessions and let you know when it's your turn to speak. If you run into any technical issues, please email us at ggrfprogram@arb.ca.gov, and we will do our best to assist you. I'll also note that this workshop is being recorded. In terms of the agenda for today's workshop, we'll start with an overview of the California Climate Investments Program and some key takeaways from our most recent annual report. Then we'll turn to providing some background information on the funding guidelines and the scope of the current update. After that, we'll dive into each of the areas we're covering in this update. We'll wrap up with next steps. As we start to dive into the workshop materials, we'd like to get a sense of who's joining us today. So we invite you to respond to this poll question. What type of organization do you represent? Are you a community-based organization or nonprofit, local or regional government with the federal government, tribal government or a tribal member, a member of the public, a consultant, a business, or other? We'll just take a moment for these responses to come in. So far, I'm seeing a lot of local or regional government attendees. Also seeing that community-based organizations and nonprofits are well represented. A few more responses trickling in. We have a handful of consultants, a business or two, and some folks that have selected other. We'll give you about 10 more seconds to finish that poll. Excellent. So yeah, we ended up with 57% of our attendees indicating that they are from a local or regional government, 15% of our attendees indicating that they are with a community-based organization or nonprofit, 8% consultants, 2% businesses, and 19% of respondees indicated other. Thank you for participating in the poll. Now I'd like to introduce Nicole Enright, who will give us a brief overview of California climate investments.
Thanks, Alex. Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole. I'm an air pollution specialist at CARB, and I'm here today to provide some background information on California climate investments. I'll start with some background on what it is, how it works, and how programs and projects are benefiting Californians. California climate investments are a statewide initiative that put billions of dollars of cap and trade proceeds to work in communities across the state, all with the goal of reducing climate pollution, benefiting disadvantaged communities and low-income communities and households, and providing health and economic benefits. California climate investments are funded by cap and trade auction proceeds deposited into the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, or GGRF. These funds are appropriated by the legislature to different agencies who administer programs that facilitate greenhouse gas emission reductions. A collection of state agencies work together to administer programs that provide the fundings to recipients that result in projects on the ground. Altogether, 23 state agencies administer 75 different California climate investments programs. These agencies and programs deliver projects across sectors such as low carbon transportation, waste diversion, natural and working lands, clean energy, affordable housing, and more. All the agencies you can see on the screen are directing billions of dollars into our state's transition to a low carbon and more equitable future. Each of these administering agencies specializes in a specific sector or set of project types that align with that agency's focus. CARB is the administrator of the GGRF and plays an important role in overseeing the use of these funds, producing the funding guidelines, collecting information about projects, and providing accountability and transparency by publicly releasing information twice a year on outcomes. CARB administers some California climate investments programs as well. CARB quantifies and reports on the achievements of programs, so we can understand what benefits programs are providing and how funds are being spent and where. Once a year around April, CARB, along with our partners in the Department of Finance, submit an annual report to the legislature. The annual report provides information about cumulative and annual achievements, the funding status of programs, estimated greenhouse gas or GHG emission reductions, benefits to priority populations, estimated co-benefits, and much more. We also release a mid-year data update around September that provides a snapshot of data collected over the past 6 months. The most recent annual report is featured on our website. That URL will appear on an upcoming slide, and we can also share that in the chat. The next few slides show the latest data from our 2023 annual report and explain how funds flow from the GGRF to agencies and ultimately results in projects that create community benefits. I'll go one step at a time here to explain the process. This process is pertinent to the topic of our workshop today, since the funding guidelines set forth the policies that administering agencies must follow when using funds, developing programs, selecting projects, and reporting on implementation. Here you can see that cap and trade auctions have generated over $23.2 billion for the GGRF. The legislature appropriates funds from the GGRF to state agencies for programs. In some cases, agencies go through public processes to determine how those funds will be distributed amongst the collections of programs they administer. Some programs are accessed through a call for proposals, but some programs distribute funding on a first-come, first-served basis or another method. Funding recipients such as nonprofits, transit agencies, businesses, tribes, farmers, individuals, and others receive funding and implement projects. In just the last year, the wide collection of California climate investments programs has implemented $1.3 billion across the state. This brings the cumulative total funds committed to projects on the ground that have known benefits to $9.3 billion. These implemented projects are adding new transit service, planting trees to reduce extreme heats, providing incentives for zero-emission vehicles, supporting renewable energy generation, conserving and restoring natural and working lands, constructing affordable housing, and other key actions to combat climate change. You can see some of those cumulative achievements here. The over 577,000 projects implemented since 2014 provide benefits to California. Projects are expected to reduce more than 97.1 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent over project lifetimes. They also provide benefits by reducing criteria air pollutants, vehicle miles traveled, water use, and more. Projects also provide economic benefits, such as supporting jobs or generating cost savings. We also report benefits to disadvantaged communities and low-income communities and households, collectively referred to as priority populations. Equity and environmental justice issues are core, equity and environmental justice are core values for California climate investments. This means that across the portfolio, we are continually working to target investments where they're most needed. We're working to foster equitable access to funds through outreach, technical assistance, and capacity building, and by supporting community priorities and leadership. As part of the legislative requirements for California climate investments, 35% of project funding must benefit priority populations. CARB works with administering agencies to set targets and guidelines for how to ensure a project is providing benefits and to quantify and track these benefits. As detailed in our 2023 annual report, 73% of project dollars overall are providing a benefit to priority populations. These benefits include cleaner air, increased mobility options, energy cost savings, new employment opportunities, just to name a few. So if you're interested in learning more about the annual report and the benefits and achievements of California climate investments, please visit our website. In addition to the annual report document, we release a suite of complementary resources. This includes program pages, project profiles, downloadable data sets. You can also explore annual report data in more detail on our data dashboard, see projects and their benefits in your area on the project map, and even read highlights from the report in a story map. Lastly, our website is a great source of information to help you learn more and to get involved with California climate investments. There's a calendar highlighting upcoming public workshops and application timelines. You can access audience-specific fact sheets and web pages and learn more about individual programs and what programs you might be eligible for. You can read about projects on the ground or highlights in your region. And of course, you can sign up for the newsletter. Now that we've discussed some background information on California climate investments, we can move on to the next portion of the agenda, where my colleague Jamie Tipton will share information on the funding guidelines update. I'll turn it over to you, Jamie.
Thanks, Nicole. Hi, everyone. My name is Jamie Tipton, and I'm an Air Resources Engineer here at CARB. Let's dive into the funding guidelines. So, what are the funding guidelines? Senate Bill, or SB 862 of 2014, directs CARB to develop this guidance, which applies to agencies that receive funding from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the portfolio of programs we refer to as California Climate Investments. The CARB board adopted the first version of the funding guidelines in 2015 and an updated version in 2018. The funding guidelines include guidance on program design and implementation, estimating GHG emission reductions and co-benefits, meeting statutory requirements, reporting requirements at both the program and project levels, tracking and reporting benefits to priority populations, and a variety of other topics. CARB is now embarking on a focused update to the funding guidelines for a few reasons. First, to address two pieces of legislation, SB 27 and Assembly Bill, or AB 680. SB 27 requires the Natural Resources Agency to establish a registry for natural and working lands projects. One of the eligibility pathways for this registry involves unfunded projects that meet CARB's minimum program requirements for carbon removal. Since the current funding guidelines do not have specific program requirements for carbon removal, draft requirements need to be developed specifically for projects that would like to participate in the registry. Those draft requirements are currently available for public comment through June 2nd. AB 680 requires CARB, in consultation with the California Workforce Development Board, to update the funding guidelines to provide guidance on incorporating workforce standards into certain California climate investments programs. In addition to these pieces of legislation, staff are also reviewing the existing funding guidelines to make clarifications or consider additional updates based on lessons learned from implementation since the last update. While we don't expect to make wholesale changes to the funding guidelines, we want to make sure we are periodically evaluating the existing guidance and revising as necessary. Lastly, as a related effort, California Climate Investments plans to launch a resource portal to house both new and existing resources to help complement the funding guidelines and support broader program implementation, both within California Climate Investments and beyond. In today's workshop, we'll walk through each of these areas in further detail, and we really look forward to hearing your feedback. We know we're covering a lot today, so we'd like to get a sense of which areas you are most interested in. You should see a poll pop up on your screen to let us know which of these 4 update areas interest you the most. SB 27, focused on natural and working lands. AB 680, focused on workforce standards. Our broader funding guidelines review, or the development of the resource portal. Or maybe you are interested equally in all of these. I'm going to pause here for a moment so we can gather some of the responses. And we should see some results come up here momentarily for you. All right. Hopefully everyone can see that. So it looks like we have a fair split, I think, across the board. Roughly 0.25% interest in Senate Bill 27, the general funding guidelines review, slightly less on Assembly Bill 680, and I think the least amount on the resource portal. But again, at the end, some general interest for all topics. It's great to see. All right, next slide, please. Before we dive into the meat of today's workshop, here's a high-level timeline of our proposed process. We launched a public survey in fall of last year to collect early input. And of course, today we're hosting a public workshop to continue that process. After today, we'll finalize the draft guidance on SB 27 and start to develop draft updates on the remaining topic areas. We expect to release those draft updates early next year, followed by another public workshop. If any of the updates are substantial, we will take them to the CARB board for consideration in fall 2024 and finalize them no later than early 2025. As you see here, we expect to have ongoing stakeholder engagement throughout this process. And we encourage you all to connect with us directly if you would like to engage in more depth. We might also conduct additional public engagement focused on AB 680, as this is the largest update area. And broadly, we welcome your input as to what other elements our public process should include. We're pleased to be kicking off the public process for the current funding guidelines update today. But we also want to acknowledge that you and other stakeholders have already shared input with us that we are considering as we tackle this update. Since we last updated the funding guidelines in 2018, there have been several public processes. This includes the development of the third and fourth investment plans, a triennial Department of Finance document developed with CARB support that provides recommendations to the legislature on GGRF priorities, and also a public survey we released in fall 2022 to capture broad priorities and perspectives on California climate investments and public engagement. Of course, individual programs also hear from stakeholders during their respective public processes. During all of these processes, we hear feedback that may inform different program areas, and we try to consider that feedback in the context in which it is most relevant and actionable. For instance, we may hear recommendations for funding of specific technologies or project types. That is outside of the scope of the funding guidelines, but can be considered in the context of individual programs or the development of the next investment plan. We also relay relevant feedback concerning specific programs to the agencies that administer them. Here, we have some of the key themes we've heard across all of this public engagement. This is certainly not a comprehensive list, but captures consistent themes from our recent survey and prior outreach. We have heard that prioritizing multi-benefit projects, focusing investments in priority populations, providing transparency on those investments, emphasizing community engagement, and communicating in clear and accessible ways is important. We have heard of the strong local partners that help make projects successful, of the examples of elements within communities that make them proud, like strong public transit and open spaces, and of the ongoing challenges that communities face, including public health issues, air pollution, access to housing, and increasingly, climate impacts like wildfire smoke, drought, extreme heat, and flooding. We have heard that communities and project proponents need timely and accurate information on funding opportunities, and that capacity building and technical assistance on applications are important to expanding access. Much of this feedback will be directly relevant to the current funding guidelines review and resource portal development. For example, we have heard that community engagement is a priority for a variety of reasons, and we'll be exploring whether any additional guidance or tools could help programs in conducting community engagement to ensure that projects are designed to meet community needs. Now that we have covered our background material, we're going to dive deeper into each of the update areas. As a reminder, we'll share a few slides providing more detail on the proposed update, pose a few key questions, and then open it up for Q&A and public comment. If you would like to share a comment verbally, please raise your hand in Zoom. Or for participants who are calling in over a phone line, please dial *9 to raise and lower your hand. Please also feel free to type your questions into the Q&A, where we may respond either in writing or answer questions live. Thank you, everyone. Now we'll be moving along to the next portion of the agenda, where my colleague Ryan Huft will be discussing the SB 27 California Carbon Sequestration and Climate Resiliency Project Registry. Ryan?
Great, thanks, Jamie. Hello, my name is Ryan Huft, and I'm an Air Resources Engineer at CARB. I'll be covering the first element of the funding guidelines update we'll be discussing today, incorporating program requirements related to Senate Bill 27 Registry. SB 27 directs the California Natural Resources Agency, or CNRA, to establish a California Carbon Sequestration and Climate Resiliency Project Registry that we'll simply call the Registry by July 1st, 2023. Eligible project types will include natural and working lands projects and direct air capture projects. CNRA will host an online database where funders can go to search for ready-to-go projects that are in need of funding. In order to be eligible to list a project on the registry, projects must provide carbon removal and climate resilience benefits. While CNRA is the lead agency developing the registry, SB 27 requires CARB to establish minimum program requirements for GGRF or other state-funded programs that did not receive funding but would like to list a project on the registry. Those minimum program requirements are what we are here to discuss today. So here's a quick overview of the two ways that projects can get listed on the registry. The first path, or pathway A, allows listing of projects that previously applied for funding from either a state program funded from the GGRF or any other state program that funds natural and working land-based projects, but that were ultimately not funded due to lack of sufficient funding. To be listed on the registry, such projects must also meet minimum program requirements established by CARB to ensure they provide carbon removal benefits. I'll be going over what's being proposed for those minimum program requirements shortly. The second path, or pathway B, allows proponents of projects in California to apply to CNRA directly to have their project listed on the registry. SB 27 includes several minimum criteria for projects to be listed under this pathway, including quantification of expected GHG benefits and monitoring and reporting. CNRA has released draft regulatory language for pathway B and is accepting public comment now. So since the current version of the funding guideline does not have minimum program requirements for carbon removal benefits, CARB needed to develop them specifically for SB 27 purposes. We are proposing to require that a project must demonstrate a net GHG benefit using our existing quantification methodologies in order to meet minimum program requirements for SB 27. This will ensure projects listed on the registry provide carbon removal benefits. CARB has developed many quantification methods and benefit calculator tools to estimate benefits from GGRF projects. These same methods can also be used to estimate the benefits from projects that would like to be on the registry. Many projects already run the quantification method when they apply for GGRF funding and will require no additional work. Project types that have existing quantification methods include forest management, wetland restoration, healthy soils practices, tree planting, biomass utilization, and conservation easements. Each quantification method describes how GHGs are reduced or sequestered and has an associated benefits calculator tool to estimate those benefits. User guides are available within each benefits calculator tool to provide guidance for potential applicants on how to appropriately use the tool. CARB expands and updates these tools on a regular basis and creates new methods as needed. These tools are available now on our website for applicants to use. The draft funding guidelines supplement for California carbon sequestration and climate resiliency project registry is available now on our website. Public comments can be sent to our email at ggrfprogram@arb.ca.gov through June 2nd. We expect to release the final guideline supplement before the release of CNRA's final rulemaking. Please also attend CNRA's virtual public workshop tomorrow at 5:30, where you can provide feedback on the current draft rulemaking. I'll drop a link in the chat so you can do that. And there's also a link on this slide that you can go to download all the materials for the draft regulatory language. So now we'd like to kick off our Q&A and public comment on this topic by posing these two questions. First, are there any additional elements CARB should consider as minimum program requirements? And two, are there project types that are missing from the suite of existing CARB quantification methods? Of course, we're open to any other comments or questions you'd like to raise, including clarifying questions. I will open it up now.
I see we have a question from Paul Mason. Paul, would you like to ask your question?
Sure, I dropped it in the chat as well, but I'll confess that I don't remember all of the quantification methodologies in detail, how they're actually structured. And not all projects have the equivalent durability of carbon sequestration. And this is an area of the registry that I'm particularly interested in, is how to deal with the fact that some projects will be permanent, you know, a good conservation project, for example, that would be similar to the outcomes of like the regulatory offset protocol. And other projects, you know, urban forestry or fuel reduction projects or some other things are going to be more ephemeral in their benefits. And so I believe the statute and the CARB requirements are that the registry address the duration of the greenhouse gas benefit. Can you remind us whether the QMs currently, the quantification methodologies currently address that sort of duration of benefit question? And when doing those quantifications, how does CARB currently deal with sort of distinguishing a permanent benefit versus a time-limited benefit? Do you discount the time-limited in some fashion? Is that a clear question?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So each quantification method is developed separately. We have a project life that is kind of developed as we're making these. Some of them are short as 1 or 2 years. If it's, you know, a short project, I think our Healthy Soils is only 3 years, where some of the project's lives are much longer. Some of the reforestation, you know, can go 50 years. So it really depends on which quantification method you're looking at. We've taken that into account as we develop those and working with the agency, and also we have a public comment process for each of those quantification methods as well. So each one is uniquely designed.
But can you still hear me?
Yeah.
So they have different project lives, but do they attempt to address the greenhouse gas benefits of those different, like how long those might persist?
Yeah, so we're only estimating what would happen over that project life. So
Okay.
Yeah.
So like in your example, your Healthy Soils, that's like a 3-year project life. I don't know what it is, but something short like that.
Yes.
You would only be assuming benefits for that project life? Correct.
So you know, we don't always know what's going to happen after the funding runs out. So we only can quantify what the benefits are for a certain period of time. That's what they developed as in the Healthy Soils. Other projects, you know, easements or things have longer project lives because there's more certainty to what's going on at the site.
That's really helpful. Is there any place where the project lives are summarized of the different existing quantification methodologies?
I don't know that we have one central location, but if you go to the quantification method of the ones that you are interested in, it should have what it is in there. I think the website.
I think it's linked in the document that you guys posted.
Yeah.
I don't want to monopolize all the time, but this is sort of the type of questions that I'm struggling with the registry, is how to distinguish the climate benefit between a project that has a 3-year life versus a 50-year life. You know, do we credit those projects differently? Which it seems like we probably should.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. I see we have a few other questions.
We have a question from Evan Edgar. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, Evan Edgar on behalf of the California Compost Coalition. Happy International Compost Awareness Week. Starts this week. I'd lobby a lot for the compost, and I know that CARB has default values for the quantitation method, and it's really discounted. We'd like to work on that in the future with CARB. But the biggest issue I have is that a lot of people in environmental justice are confusing carbon capture storage to what we do with Healthy Soils Initiative. And you'd be surprised that I'm not a big carbon capture storage guy. I don't really believe in it. It's really suspect, but I am huge on sequestering carbon into the natural working lands, into the soils. Is there some way you can differentiate these two? Because right now they're bundled a lot. You guys bundle them in the slide, and for some environmental justice folks, they can't tell the difference because they talk what I'm doing with healthy soils in the same breath as carbon capture and storage. So if I have any advice, some way that you can unbundle the registry so that the healthy soils, they stand alone and apart and not bundle with carbon capture storage, because that's a fat target by environmental justice. And I believe that they are supportive of the healthy soils initiatives. So please unbundle them, and look forward to working with CARB staff on the emission reduction factors for compost in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, before we move on to the next comment, I was going to mention that Clessy from CNRA has her hands up. I think she has some words she'd like to offer in response to Paul's comment.
Yeah, and actually on the last comment as well, as far as debundling direct air capture from the rest of the natural and working lands projects on the registry, the bill is explicit that we need to include direct air capture, so we can't necessarily remove it. But I will add that there is a provision of the bill that requires direct air capture projects to evaluate the public health and environmental impacts of those projects prior to being listed on the registry, which the rest of the natural and working lands projects do not have that requirement. So there is a kind of separate treatment of the direct air capture projects from the rest of the natural and working lands projects. And just to Paul's question, really appreciate these comments and getting into the nuances between some of these different projects. I'll just mention that we're not creating credits. So in terms of crediting projects, just not quite the right terminology. And we're trying to, carry the message through that this is not a we're not creating a voluntary market where you can buy and sell credits necessarily. And in terms of, adding more value or prioritizing projects that have a longer duration, this is something we can bring back to the team and chat about. And I'd love for you to add that in your public comment letter. And if you're coming to our workshop tomorrow, to mention it as well. The bill does not give any preference to the projects that have a longer duration of carbon benefits. It merely says we have to say what that duration is, and then it's up to the funder if they're interested in funding a project with less duration. I'd also mention that that's just the carbon side of this registry, that the registry is also meant to drive on our climate resilience goals. And the duration of those benefits may differ and not align with the same duration as some of the carbon goals. So again, I think this would go to what's the funder's priorities. We're trying to make that most information available.
Great, thanks, Clessy.
We have one more question from Michael Wolf. Michael, would you like to ask your question?
If you're talking, Michael, you're still on mute.
I'm not sure if he has permission to speak, if he would like.
Michael? Any other questions while we wait?
Michael, we were having trouble hearing you. If you still have a question, please feel free to paste that into the Q&A function. Thank you.
Right. Well, not seeing any other questions. I will thank you everyone for the comments. We'll move on to the next item of our agenda, where my colleague Hope Couples will be discussing AB 680 workforce standards element of the update.
Thanks, Ryan. Hi, everyone. My name is Hope Couples. I'm an air pollution specialist here at CARB, and I'll be discussing AB 680, which is the second piece of legislation motivating the update to the funding guidelines. Passed in 2021, this bill requires CARB, in consultation with the California Workforce Development Board, to update the funding guidelines by July 2025 to ensure that applicants to certain GGRF-funded programs meet specific workforce standards. The 6 standards included in AB 680 are, they're shown on the screen, but they include fair and responsible employer standards, inclusive procurement policies, meaning applicant procurement policies that prioritize bids from entities that demonstrate the creation of high-quality jobs and/or the creation of jobs in under-resourced tribal and low-income communities, prevailing wage for construction work, community workforce agreements for construction projects over $1 million, preference for projects with educational or training partnerships that target residents of under-resourced tribal and low-income communities in the same region as the proposed project, and preference to applicants that demonstrate that jobs created through the proposed project will be high-quality jobs. Now I'd like to introduce Sherry Mung from the California Workforce Development Board, who will share some words with us about the importance of this bill and about workforce standards more generally. Sherry, take it away.
Thanks, Hope. And thank you everyone for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Sherry Mung, and I manage the statewide partnerships portfolio at the California Workforce Development Board, or State Board for short. The State Board is working closely with CARB to provide technical assistance to support the integration of workforce development standards in programs subject to AB 680. As a little bit of background, at the State Board, we've been building and expanding on our flagship initiative, the High Road Training Partnerships, which is a new way of doing workforce development with a commitment of integrating job quality, equity, and climate resiliency. The intent is to shape labor markets in a way that impacts economic equity to get to the state's goal of a California for all, in how companies and whole industries recruit, hire, train, promote, and retain workers, and to scale that work across every critical sector and in every region of California. But we've seen that workforce training on its own is not enough. What really works is when that same commitment to the goals of job quality, equity, and climate resiliency is built into government contracting, granting, procurements, and into programs that have workforce development components in them. We're able to use these powerful government levers to reduce carbon emissions by shaping markets. We're also able to apply the same logic and intentionality to move the needle in achieving economic equity, which is why the work that we're doing under AB 680 is so important, right? To ensure that California's investments to fight climate change are going to communities where funding is most needed. AB 680 will help bridge the gap by implementing the key policies, measures, and standards that Hope just discussed, which are outlined on the screen in front of you. And lastly, in alignment with the State Board's High Road Policy Agenda, AB 680 addresses the need for administering agencies to enact measures that help to ensure positive labor market outcomes of California climate investment programs. And with that, I will hand the mic back over to you, Hope. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Sherry. Next, we'll discuss the applicability of AB 680. These standards are only required for a subset of California climate investments programs and projects. First, the bill is limited to programs that receive continuous GGRF appropriations. It also explicitly exempts 3 of these programs, leaving 4 programs subject to the AB 680 requirements. These 4 programs are the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Program, the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program, and the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. The bill then establishes certain project level exemptions, which will go into more detail in the next slide. The end result of these exemptions is a specific subset of projects for which there will be a compliance obligation under the bill. The project level exemptions include exemptions for projects that involve federal funding, housing projects that include 100% affordable housing units, grants for technical assistance and research, and for applicants that are not employers. Our goal is to include guidance in the funding guidelines on how to apply these exemptions within individual programs. AB 680 is building on an existing emphasis on workforce policy within California climate investments. The initial legislation that established the GGRF included the priority to foster job creation and job training wherever possible. And our funding guidelines currently include recommended actions administering agencies can take to accomplish these goals. We require jobs reporting, including the results of our prospective jobs co-benefit modeling tool for all projects, as well as reporting on real-world jobs supported directly by GGRF dollars for projects meeting certain criteria. We want to use this opportunity in developing guidance under AB 680 to create additional optional guidance for other California climate investments administering agencies to incorporate workforce policies into their programs. We also want to learn how to better track jobs information from California climate investments programs, and if there are any tools we can create to better support programs in this work. Given that background and context, we have a couple questions to help us start thinking through what guidance would be most helpful to meet the standards in AB 680 and how we can support workforce development standards more broadly across GGRF funded programs. Please note that we do plan on conducting additional public engagement on this topic to develop the guidance, but we want to use the questions shown here to get the discussion started. Our first question, from the applicant's perspective, what type of guidance would be the most helpful to meet the standards in AB 680? Our second question, CARB also plans to provide guidance to support implementation of optional workforce standards across all GGRF funded sectors and programs. What sectors and/or project types are the highest priority for incorporating workforce standards? With that, I will pause so we can open it up for Q&A and any feedback you may have. My colleague Alex Stockton will be joining me to assist with any questions that come up. Feel free to respond to the questions we have on the slide or provide any other comments or feedback.
We have a question from Chiara Reyano.
Hi, this is actually Julia Hatton with Rising Sun Center for Opportunity. Hi, Hope. Great to hear you and see you. I just wanted to, I see the word optional. So CARB also plans to provide guidance for implementation of optional workforce standard. What's the reasoning behind making workforce standards optional, particularly given the comments that Sherry just made about the real importance of tying labor and workforce standards to climate investments to support economic equity?
Thank you for the question. Well, broadly speaking, AB 680 is establishing requirements for a subset of programs in particular. And, at this early point in the process, I think it's our position that we'd like to encourage our programs broadly to adopt as many of these standards as possible where they're not already required to do so by statute. Of course, we'd like to see these picked up and incorporated broadly throughout the portfolio. However, at this early point in the process, it's not entirely clear to us how some of these standards might apply to certain programs or whether or not we have sort of the authority necessary to require these things broadly. So that's kind of the vision at this point. I hope that's responsive to your question.
Yeah, just that makes sense, and just want to give a plug for incorporating workforce standards wherever possible. So thank you.
Thank you.
Valerie, were there any other hands raised?
Not yet. There are no other hands raised.
Okay, we'll give it a second in case anyone else has any other questions.
We just have one hand raised. So we have a question from Emily.
Hi, is this working?
Yes.
Great, thank you. It's not so much a question, more of just a statement. Is now the right time for that?
Yes, definitely.
Great, thank you. Well, hi, my name is Emily Gartenberg. I'm the Senior Policy Coordinator at Jobs Move America. And I just really wanted to thank you for creating this space to discuss AB 680. It's something that's really exciting to us, and we're looking forward to its implementation. And as I think Sherry mentioned, it's really clear, and we have a lot of experience, that procurement policies can be transformative for local communities and workforces. And it's also known and clear that, unfortunately, manufacturing jobs in the clean energy sector still really lag behind those in the combustion industries in terms of wages and benefits. So I think that we all agree that it's vital that we focus on raising these standards. And my organization, Jobs Move America, does have some policies that really help with this, like the U.S. Employment Plan that have been used across California and has been approved by the US DOT. So I just wanted to kind of mention that I think there's a lot of advocates on this call that have a lot of policies and tools to kind of make some of these really important goals happen. And, you know, we just look forward to working with you on this in the future, and just really thank you for having this space here today.
Thank you so much, Emily, for your comment. If you don't mind, we'll take down your contact info, and maybe we can follow up after the webinar to kind of get some of those resources and tools that you're mentioning.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, anything else popping up, Valerie?
Nothing else.
Okay, great. Thank you all for your comments. We really appreciate it. And like we mentioned, this is just the start of the discussion on this topic. Next, I'll pass back to Jamie Tipton, who'll discuss some of the other revisions to the funding guidelines that we're considering. Jamie?
Thanks, Hope. So, in addition to updating the funding guidelines pursuant this new legislation that Ryan and Hope covered, staff are also considering updates in other areas as part of a periodic review of the guidelines based on lessons learned from implementation and new policy priorities. There are several clarifications and other minor updates that staff are considering, based primarily on discussions with administering agencies, including clarifications on requirements for reporting on jobs, low-income households, and projects with multiple components, and guidance on accounting and reporting for interest accrued on GGRF dollars, among several other things. Staff are also considering providing additional guidance on outreach to tribes following the inclusion of lands under the control of federally recognized tribes in Cali PA's updated disadvantaged communities designation. And staff are considering updates to reporting of project outcomes to clarify expectations for post-project data collection and reporting, and to make the information more usable. In addition, staff are considering new formatting to improve accessibility and ease of use in program development and implementation, and to allow for easier updates to individual subsections of the guidance in the future. Of course, this is not a comprehensive list of the updates, and there may be several other updates under consideration based on ongoing feedback and recommendation from stakeholders. With that, we'd like to pose another round of questions to our participants here today. How can the funding guidelines be made more accessible and usable as a resource in program development and implementation? What are the critical missing details, clarifications, or gaps that need to be addressed? What other stakeholders should be involved in the update process? And of course, we're open to any other feedback that you'd like to raise here, including just comments. So as before, I'll pause again as folks may raise their hand or input a question or comment into the Q&A feature.
There are no questions so far, Jamie.
Great. I think given the pause, we can move to the next section, but I will note here for our participants, if a question does come up, there should be an opportunity at the end to raise something then. You can also continue to use the ongoing Q&A feature. So with that, I will pass it back to my colleague, Nicole Enright, to talk about a new concept we are calling the resource portal. Take it away, Nicole.
Thanks, Jamie. And like Jamie mentioned, as I'm talking through this last portion, if some questions or comments come to mind, feel free to raise your hand or type in the Q&A, and we'll have some time to answer remaining questions that you might have. Okay, so the last area I want to cover is not a direct update to the funding guidelines, but it's a complementary effort. And that's a new concept we're calling the resources portal. The idea here is that there are lots of additional resources, tools, guidance, or other materials that CARB and the state could provide that go beyond what's contained in the funding guidelines. We're envisioning this new resource portal, a collection of web-based resources, as a complement to the funding guidelines. We also see it as an opportunity to build on the funding guidelines to help climate programs achieve their goals. We also know that there are lots of great existing state materials out there, but they're often not centralized in one place. So we want to make this an easy to use centralized location for key relevant resources. And we're thinking about many different audiences here. This could include state administering agencies, but also technical assistance providers, local jurisdictions, and other participants in climate projects. We've identified an initial set of resource types that we would imagine including, but of course there's no reason we need to limit the scope to this list here. First, one of the key opportunities we see here is to pull together best practices, checklists, or other how-to guides to help achieve certain objectives. We're also thinking about videos or story maps to help highlight real-world examples or provide explanations of program guidelines or tools. We're also thinking about analytical reports and data tools to help gain insight into implementation of California climate investments and identify areas for improvement. So those are just a couple examples of the many things that we could include in the resource portal. But we would love your input on a few key questions. And of course, other thoughts you may have about the resource portal, and then we can return to more general questions as well. So three key questions here. What new materials could we develop that would assist you in implementing programs or projects or building partnerships? What existing state tools or resources would you recommend we include in the resource portal? And third question, how can we better communicate project benefits to individual communities? So we'll take a pause, see if there's any hands, or feel free to type in the Q&A box as well.
There are no questions so far, Nicole. We could give it a couple more moments if you would like.
Okay. I can just share a couple examples of some of the resources that we're thinking about developing or pulling in that may already be existing. And also, if you don't have any ideas at this point, you can think about it and email us, and we'd love to hear from you. So some other things that the resource portal could include are additional guidance to agencies on jobs reporting, promising practices on tribal engagement, checklists for equitable program design, California Climate Investments 101 video, or case studies from implemented projects. So those are some ideas, but we just want to see if you have others. I see a comment from Walter in the Q&A. A grants mapping comparison tool would be great. There are so many grants where we offer similar eligible activities or complement other grants. Thanks. Any other thoughts or questions here? Otherwise, we can move on to our general Q&A. Oh, I see another one from Caitlin. I see our administering agencies have some great ideas. Thank you. Caitlin is sharing support for outreach to disadvantaged or low-income communities would be useful, as would technical assistance for grantees to incorporate priority population benefits into project design. Yes, thank you so much. We'll take note of these suggestions and save them for our development. I see one more comment from Pradeep, distinguishing individual net benefits and net community benefits. Thank you. I'll turn it back to Valerie to see if there's any hands that I may have missed.
There are no hands.
Thanks, Valerie.
No problem.
Okay. Well, not seeing any others, but of course, please do email us. We'll put the email in our chat, and there will be plenty of other opportunities to weigh in on what you think would be useful for the resource portal. Okay, so let's go to our next slide. I'll run through a few next steps and then we'll open it up. We have some time remaining for more Q&A. If something came to mind on a previous topic on a previous slide, we can answer that. Or if you want to type in a question, now's the time. So I'll review these next steps first. So first, we just wanted to thank you all for this great feedback and your participation today. We really appreciate your taking the time to engage with us on this effort. So first, a reminder that the SB 27 supplemental guidance is currently out for public comment, and you can email us your comments. I'll also note that CNRA has released a pre-rulemaking document. That's the concept discussion draft regarding SB 27 implementation. And that's now open for public comment through May 30th. Also, as a reminder, CNRA will be hosting a virtual public workshop on the concept discussion draft tomorrow, May 9th, from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. And we've got a link in the chat to register for that. And in terms of next steps, we'll be considering the feedback we heard today as we develop the additional guidance we discussed, with the goal of releasing draft guidance for public comments in early 2024. And we also expect to conduct additional public process in the near term on AB 680 program elements. So on the next slide, we have our email address there where you can reach out to us. You can visit our website to subscribe to our newsletter or follow us on social media. But most importantly, please do reach out to us if you would like to engage with us more directly on this effort. So we'll take a pause here, see if there are any more questions or comments. You can raise your hand or type in the Q&A box. Alex, you're muted.
Hi, Nicole. I just noticed that we had a comment or question pop up in our Q&A that we've already answered one time, but I thought it might benefit the audience to answer it live. The question is from Kayla Gordon, and she's asking, will this video be reposted? I want to answer that. Yes, our expectation is that we'll be able to post the video of this workshop on our funding guidelines webpage. If you check the answered questions box in the Q&A, you should be able to find a link to that page there. I'll also have someone post it into the chat. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Alex.
There are no raised hands, Nicole.
Okay. We'll give it a few more minutes. If you have any other questions or comments on the topics of today's webinar, I'm not seeing any. So I'll move on to a few wrap-up statements. Oh, but of course, I see one hand up. Valerie, I'll turn it to you.
Yes, we have a question. Let me unmute. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Hi, this is Eric with the City of Long Beach. My question is towards AB 680 in regards to the Community Workforce Agreement, because I'm the city's Project Labor Agreement Administrator. I just want to completely understand our responsibilities. It does mention that we must show evidence if we're applying for over $1 million for construction work. And it says we should have a targeted hiring plan within that community workforce agreement. Our current agreement is limited to a 40% local hire and a 10% targeted workforce that includes individuals that face employment barriers. will that limit be an issue for the application?
Thanks for your question. I'll invite Alex and Hope to chime in there.
Thank you for the question. I think that that's actually a live topic right now and not something that's been totally decided yet. So we definitely welcome your input on that topic to help inform our work as we move through the update process. It sounds to me like you do have some of these elements in place. We just haven't really defined what the specific requirements are going to be with respect to those items. But it does sound like you have a head start at least. So it's great to hear that you've built some of that into your work already.
Right. Okay. It's just that across the Southern California agencies, it is my understanding we all have a percentage goal included in any agreement that's already in place. I just want to know if if there's some more work that we need to go back and maybe revise and just to make sure that we will qualify if we submit the application.
Certainly. And again, I'll just state that these requirements go into effect once we published the finalized update to our funding guidelines. So you definitely have some time there, and I would encourage you to continue to engage with us on this topic as we move through that process to ensure that you have a handle on what the standard is going to be and what the requirements are going to be, and time to prepare to ensure that you're able to participate in any solicitation processes moving forward.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other hands or questions?
There are no raised hands so far.
All right, just a reminder, if you think of something later, or you'd like to send us a comment or a question, or you'd like to engage with us more on these topics from today's workshop, you can email us at ggrfprogram@arb.ca.gov. And we know that there are a lot of different stakeholders involved in the California climate investments landscape, and that in-depth discussions are often needed to really understand key opportunities and challenges. So more opportunities upcoming. I see that there is a question in that regard in the Q&A box. Alex, can I turn to you?
Certainly. Let me just see if I can pull that up here. The question is, when is the next workshop? We haven't scheduled the next workshop yet, and we haven't determined exactly when that'll take place, but we expect it to coincide with the release of the draft guidance, the draft update to the funding guidelines, which we have slated for like early 2024 at this point. That said, we are expecting, as was previously mentioned, to conduct some additional public process on AB 680 requirements in particular. So I would encourage you, if you're not already signed up for our listserv, to please sign up for our listserv. Well, you'll get timely notices in advance of any upcoming public events.
Excellent. Okay, well, not seeing any more. Alex, would you like to give it a minute or two for any remaining questions?
Yeah, we'll give it until 3:20.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions?
I see a question about how to sign up for the listserv. We will answer that in the chat as well. But we have a newsletter, and you can find that on caclimateinvestments.ca.gov. Great place to sign up for our California Climate Investments newsletter, and you'll hear about our upcoming workshops and engagement opportunities.
And we'll definitely have some links posted in the chat with respect to that in just a moment.
All right, well, looks like we're at 3:20. So with that, we'll conclude the workshop today. And we want to thank you once again for your participation. Your input is critical to ensuring California climate investments are the best they can be. So thank you all so much. Take care.